I joined my first ever game jam. It did not end well. So my first ever game jam was this Pixel Game Jam 2024. Here's the theme. Aqua, so basically anything with water. I checked out the rules and they all seem pretty standard, but it also said that I could use any assets that I wanted to as long as I had the license. So Kenny assets worked just fine. I went to Kenny's site and looked at all the different assets that had water in it, and I found this pirate pack that looked pretty promising. I wasn't totally sure on what game I was going to make yet, but that was okay. I could figure that out as I went. So I actually lost a lot of the footage at the beginning because I was recording this late at night. So we're going to start from the point where I made my own dock in Aseprite. And I'm not an artist, but I think it turned out alright. So as you can see here, I've got this little island set up with trees and rocks and stuff, with collisions set up where the player can't go into the water, but he can go onto the dock and into the ship. And then the ship can drive around with the WASD keys, and then you can redock onto the dock, which is pretty cool. I then went and added a second island that I could sail to, and I was having this issue where the shoreline is actually what's keeping the player from going into the water. So in order for him to pass that up on the dock, I just deleted the tile behind it. And a little bit cheesy, but it's a game jam, and I don't know, maybe that would work for a real game anyway, but whatever. I then tried to make a tile map for the land, so making islands would be easier. And as you can see here, that didn't go so well at first. My second attempt was a lot better, but still way off. Third attempt was pretty terrible, as you can see. And then the fourth was pretty dang close, but it wasn't perfect. But I was really tired of it at this point, so I decided to move on to something else. And here I started working on the cannon for the ship. So I set it up where the cannon follows the cursor. I got that working pretty fast, which I thought was cool. I then had it spawn cannonballs, but they didn't have velocity and they were still attached to the cannon in a weird way. Next, I actually gave them a little bit of a velocity, but they came in pairs and they also were still connected to the cannon. I fixed that up and I also made these destructible rocks. I then changed it to where they were indestructible and these green ones were destructible so that I could make a border around the world with these gray rocks. I thought the destructible rocks would be really cool to kind of lock progression behind getting the cannon. I then wanted to make some villages on the island, but the tile sets didn't match up. So after a lot of deliberation, I decided to just redo everything with a different tile set. And as you can see here, this is what I did with the first one of the footage that I lost. I went through and made all the collision layers for the tile set. I really like Godot's tile set editor because it's really simple to use. Adding the collision layers is very intuitive. Personally, I've had a much better time using this than anything in Unity. It took a long time to redo everything because not only did I have to redo the tile set, but all the different items like the dock and the rocks had to be resized, as you can see here, because those were all sized to the larger tile set before. But I think it was worth it in the end. It ended up looking a little bit better, and I am happy with it. I also went ahead and added some animations for the cannonball explosion, and I added a custom cursor for the mouse. Here you can see I made a rough drawing of what I was kind of going for, where there's this little starter island in the middle where you begin, and 3 main islands surrounding it, each with their own like dungeon where you would unlock some kind of a item or key, and you'd come up here to this top island, and there'd be these 3 locations where you'd put those keys, which would unlock a new dock, and you take a boat up to this northmost island where you'd fight some kind of a boss. That was a working idea, but I was still a long ways to go from that. The next thing that I did was add a sword that rotates around the player when you move your cursor, which I thought was pretty cool, and it swings when you click. Though you can see here the animation was backwards. Took me a while to figure that one out, but eventually got it. I then added this ghost enemy that when the sword collides with it, it does damage. And while it would be an interesting mechanic to have my sword swing around me like this to do damage, I really just want to make it do damage when I swing. So I fixed that functionality. I then made the ghosts follow you when you get within a certain range. And currently they don't deal any damage, but I add that functionality a little bit later. I also made it where the cannon can destroy them, so that's pretty cool. I almost lost everything, so thankfully I was able to save things, and then I decided to push everything up onto GitHub, as I should have done from the beginning. Next, I made a little ladder sprite for the dungeons, because there wasn't one in the sprite sheet already. Here's the first dungeon on the main island that's really basic. I just made this switch and a gate that you have to open up. Then I made this dialogue system that I found online, which ended up being pretty cool. At this point, I was already running out of time. It was a 10-day game jam, and I started 2 days late, and I have a full-time job. So I decided to cut out the 4th island where the boss was going to be and go ahead and just stick with the 3 main ones. So basically, my new story is that you start off on this little island with your grandpa. You were supposed to help him do the farming, but the wells dried up, so you have to go fix that. And then you learn that the wells on the islands all around you have dried up as well, so you have to go help them. So over here on the west, you have this island where you meet the blacksmith, who will give you the cannon when you fix the well at his village. Then you can use that cannon over here to the east on Serpent Island, where you can break these rocks and then sail over to the tail where you can dock. And then once you fight past the Forest of Ghosts, you make it to this maze, and once you get through, you'll get to the next dungeon. And honestly, at this point, I was pretty much out of time. I couldn't even finish the 3rd island because I had spent the whole night, like literally an all-nighter, working on bugs that I could not get fixed, but I needed to get my game published. So I just had to deal with it and accept that I had not been able to finish what I wanted to finish and learn some lessons from that. So the bug I spent the most time trying to fix was when I took my ship over to another island and then I went into a dungeon. As soon as I came back out, the ship would start back at its original starting point. So that was a pain, but eventually I got that fixed where the boat was staying at the right dock, but then it would go sideways whenever I drove it. So this was the point where I really ran out of time and had to publish my game. I wasn't able to fix the boat driving sideways, and the cannon wasn't working properly either, but I was simply out of time. So that's when I published my game. Then I went and played some of the other games that had been submitted and rated a few of them, and I saw some really interesting games there for sure. But after a while I noticed that I couldn't seem to find my game anywhere, and I've never done this before, so I wasn't sure if you just can't see your own games or what was going on. So I was concerned that maybe something had gone wrong. So I asked people on the Discord about it, and turns out that on itch.io, by default, the visibility of your game is set to draft, and I totally missed that when I first published my game, so I didn't actually publish it, and therefore I missed the deadline and could not have my game be part of the game jam, which was definitely disappointing. I reached out to the organizers on Discord, but I never heard back from them, so that's all right. Ultimately, I did it for the experience of making the game in a short period of time, rather than actually trying to win a game jam. So, as disappointing as it was still worth it. It was still a great experience, and I'm very glad that I did it. So after all that, I decided I wanted to go back and finish the things that I didn't get to finish originally. So here you see the 3rd island that I finished out. It's nothing exciting, but I just wanted to get something there. Then I ran into this issue where my main scene was being corrupted somehow, and I thought I was losing everything, but it turns out that if I just went into my files and copied it, I could open up the copy no problem. And so I just had to do this over and over again every time that this error popped up. But anyway, I'll show you all the dungeons. Here's the original one, and as you see, I added some darkness with a light around the player. Here's the 2nd dungeon, where there's a key code combination puzzle, and under all these boxes, they're destructible. You hit them with your sword and they'll break. There's the code to that. It's the code to that gate. The 3rd one is not very exciting. It's just multiple rooms full of ghosts with a switch at the very end. Nothing very challenging. And then the last one to go with the 3rd island is just something where you basically have to go in and out of the dungeon and the island to make it through and fight these ghosts. And as you see here, this is all 3 of the main islands surrounding the starter island. And then I published that change onto itch, and there you go. That was my first ever game jam and my first ever game on itch. So if you want to check it out, you can go to the link in the description and it'll take you right there. So to sum up my experience with my first ever game jam, I'd have to say that I really enjoyed it. You know, it was a bit stressful at times. I pulled 2 all-nighters, spent pretty much all of my free time working on it, and it was definitely a difficult experience, but I really had a good time. I think that the experience was well worth it. And honestly, the hardest part of this whole process was actually making this video. Video editing is pretty difficult, so I'm still trying to figure out how to streamline that process, but I definitely intend on making better videos as time goes on and I learn more, as well as getting better equipment in the future. I definitely plan on joining more game jams in the near future to gain some more experience. If you like this video and you see potential in me as a game dev, I would love it if you would subscribe and like the video. Thanks so much.